Good morning, readers. Today we are going to be learning how to make sense of complicated texts. Go ahead and get out your reading learning intention sheet. Fill out the date. Today's date is January 7th, so that's 1/7. Go ahead and fill in the book you're reading. And today, as a reader, I am working on making sense of complicated texts. Once you have completed this, give your teacher a thumb up so that she knows you're ready to move on. Readers, as we read our historical fiction books, it is really important that we monitor ourselves to make sure that everything is making sense. The books that we are reading are really complicated and have lots and lots of details. So, when we're reading a historical fiction book, we need to keep track of the who, the what, when, where, and why. So we're going to use Number the Stars as an example to help us do that. Every time we meet a character in a historical fiction book, we need to keep track of who they are. We need to think about all the details about them, when we meet them, where we meet them, and why the author included them in the text. As readers, we should keep track of this in our heads and in our packets. We're going to read a few pages of Number the Stars, and we're going to do some of this work together. Let's take a look back at Chapter 1. Before I begin to read, I want you to get out your reader's notebook, and I want you to take notes about the characters. We're going to start with Chapter 1, the first page. "I'll race you to the corner, Ellen." Anne-Marie adjusted the leather pack on her back so that her school books balanced evenly. "Ready?" She looked at her best friend. Ellen made a face. "No," she said, laughing. "You know I can't beat you. My legs aren't as long. Can't we just walk, like civilized people?" She was a stocky 10-year-old, unlike lanky Anne-Marie. Let's stop there and let's think for a second. We've been introduced to two characters so far, so you should have written in your notebook Anne-Marie and Ellen. What did we learn about these two characters so far? We learned that Anne-Marie is lanky, as the author described her, and that Ellen is a little more stocky. That means that she's shorter. And that they're both best friends with each other. So we're going to write that down. And finally, we learned that Anne-Marie was an eager runner. That means she liked to run. And Ellen, not so much. So we're going to put a reluctant runner. That means she doesn't really like to run. As I read more, I want you to continue to record notes about these two characters. We have to practice for the athletic meet on Friday. I know I'm going to win the girls' race this week. I was second last week, but I've been practicing every day. "Come on, Ellen," Anne-Marie pleaded, eyeing the distance to the next corner of the Copenhagen street. "Please?" Ellen hesitated, then nodded and shifted her own rucksack of books against her shoulders. "Oh, all right. Ready?" she said. "Go!" shouted Anne-Marie, and the girls were off, racing along the residential sidewalk. Anne-Marie's silvery blonde hair flew behind her, and Ellen's dark pigtails bounced against her shoulders. "Wait for me," wailed little Kirsty, left behind, but the two older girls weren't listening. Anne-Marie outdistanced her friend quickly, even though one of her shoes came untied as she sped along the street called Osterbrigade, past the small shops and cafes of her neighborhood in northeast Copenhagen. Laughing, she skirted an elderly lady in black who carried a shopping bag made of string. A young woman pushing a baby carriage moved aside to make way. The corner was just ahead. I'm going to pause right here, and I'd like you to continue to take notes, thinking about what we just read. Remember that we're not just thinking about the characters, although we did meet a new one that you should have written down, but we're also thinking about where. So remember that. Who, what, when, where, and why. Take a few notes on what we just read. I want you to compare your notes with your partner's notes. Notice what they have that maybe you forgot to write down, or what you have that maybe they forgot to write down, and make sure you add those things to your notes. You and your reading partners should have added a note about Kirsty and that she was younger, and that the city that the story took place in is Copenhagen, and you may have even added that it was in the northeast side of Copenhagen, and it's a city with shops and cafes, and you could have added to Ellen's that she had dark hair and that Anne-Marie had blonde hair. Today, as you read your historical fiction book, you are going to note these things in your historical fiction packet. You are going to think about the who, the what, the when, and the where. You're going to share these with your book clubs when you meet. So be thinking about who the characters are, what they're doing, when the story took place, where the story took place, and why the things are happening. Let's make it a great reading day.